Hey, we're live.
Yes.
Hello. Hello. Oh, and we've got a comment from Kat Benson saying performative influencer allyship. This is a really important topic. I agree.
I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm excited to talk about it too.
Inshallah.
Hello. What's up, my fellow small business supporters? Thank you for coming to a Thursday morning live stream. I know that this is kind of a different time, but we've been doing some bonus videos these past couple of weeks just because there's a lot of topics to discuss. And I'm like, you know what? We're gonna have some discussions. So today I am here with Mase III, and he reached out to me over email about doing this live stream, and I'm really excited for it. I recently read one of his poetry collections, and he is a poet, a speaker, an activist, a TED Talk speaker, which is amazing. So do you want to just kind of start off by introducing yourself and your work and what you do?
Yeah. So for folks that are unfamiliar with my work, like Savvy said, my name is Mase III. Y'all can call me Mase or Mase for short. And primarily, what people typically know me for is as a poet. I'm also the founder of an organization called Awkward, which specifically supports trans and queer artists of color, especially as we get pushed out of 9-to-5 work. And I am an author, so I write books. That's where my life is taking me right now. And I'm the co-editor of a project called the Black Trans Prayer Book, where I censor Black trans divinity and specifically theologies around Black trans folks with my colleague, Lady Dame Figueroa Didi. So that's a bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed, I watched your TED Talk that you did. And everyone should watch it if you haven't already. I think I linked it in the description below. So I have links to his Instagram, website, and videos, I think. So it's all linked down there if you want to check it out. But
yeah, don't follow me on YouTube because I don't know what I'm doing there yet. But like Instagram, I'm like, I definitely know what I'm doing.
Oh yeah, your Instagram is fantastic. I see like people sharing your posts in stories, and I was like, oh, this is cool. You're like a little Instagram famous. I love it.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Awesome. So I watched your TED Talk, which was about I loved the topic you were discussing about like how people value politeness over justice. And I think that's especially relevant when we're seeing, nowadays with, how, politics is conducted or how things are conducted on the news, that people are so obsessed with like, if you say it nicely, that means it's okay, which is not true at all.
And nice to who? Like, that's actually the question I always have for people is like, when you're saying you're being nice, like, are you being nice to people in power? Are you being nice to people that are actually being harmed? Are you being nice in a situation where it actually requires urgency? Like, what does that actually mean to be nice to people?
Yeah. And I think that's so true. And we see that a lot with like, you can look at someone like Donald Trump and be like, well, he's so mean. He's so rude all the time, obviously. But then there's a ton of other people who people would say, oh, well, at least they're not rude like him. It's like, yeah, but they're still doing a lot of things that are inexcusable.
And they're still nice to him.
And they're nice to him too. Yeah, they're nice to him, and they're nice to So there's a very strong fixation on like, are you being friendly? Are you being? And I care about being friendly. I want people to feel welcome around me and that kind of thing. But that's not the be all end all of how to be a good human.
Yeah, and I think it's also relative, right? Because there's some situations in which, I'll say for myself, right? So like there's spaces where people will think I'm not friendly regardless, simply because I'm a Black person in their space. I work with a lot of, even going back to working with a lot of faith communities and stuff like that, there's lots of different spaces where people will say niceness is their biggest virtue. And I might come in and they weren't expecting when they were talking about transness to have a Black person come in. They weren't expecting when they were talking about queerness for me to come in. They weren't expecting, all these different things, right? And then, people are standoffish simply because you're not what they're expecting when they're talking about who their community is.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's true. Great. So I guess before we get into like some of the other topics, I read the book that you mentioned that you recommended to me. It's called, oh, hold up, I'll get it off the shelf so I can show it to everyone. 1 second.
I brought some copies here next to me too, just in case. Inshallah. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Also, Barbara is here. Hello, Barbara. Glad you're here. Barbara is awesome. She's an author as well. So this is the book is called where is it? There it is. White Folks Be Trippin', and it is a collection of poetry and like memoir pieces and things like that. And I thought a lot of these pieces were excellent, especially I think the one that I think people need to, I recommend this book to everyone, so it's linked in the description below, but there's one piece in here that was like one about, kids being incarcerated. And that one was like just the way that a lot of people tend to victim blame in that situation. Anyway, can you I guess talk to me a little bit about this book and like your inspirations for it and the messages you want to get across in it and all of that?
Yeah, so so for me, this book actually started a few years ago as a chapbook, right? So for people not familiar with chapbooks, but right, so poets all in the day, had those little zine-like books that we kind of take around with us. And so I started this book when I moved from New York to Seattle being a much wider space in the world, right? And so the full title of the book being White Folks Be Trippin', Ethnography Through Poetry and Prose. And so the ethnography piece is like, I was observing, like I've already been an expert on whiteness, having to observe it, but I was like, oh wow, no, I'm really like in it, like everything, everywhere is whiteness. And so part of the book is, the poetry pieces and and some of the micro memoir stuff. And some of it is also for Black and brown folks that are reading and Indigenous folks that are reading it, just so fill in the blank spaces. So for people to process the absurdities of dealing with white space, And so I think for me, what I'm very much invested in within any kind of thing I'm writing is not just like what my process is, but also saying like, hey, we're having a journey together as author and reader collectively. And so just giving even other Black and brown Indigenous folks spaces to imagine.
Barbara says she's definitely going to grab a copy of this book. Awesome. Well, Barbara, I hope you like it. Let me know your thoughts on it, definitely. And I like that it was a genre crossover too. I think that's what I really like about, I could go on forever. There's so many things I love about the independent publishing world and the world of creators, getting their work out there directly to the audience who needs it without having to get a large corporation involved, a big publishing house that's trying to say whose voices matter and whose don't. I have so many things I could go on forever about that. But what I love is that you get books like this, where you have like these genre crossovers where it's like, okay, we've got pieces of poetry throughout. We've also got like, you have those fill in the blank sections, and it's just like a collection that works well together and makes a cohesive piece for what it is. But, some publishers might be like, I don't know how to market that,
Yeah, so honestly, like I think I do this, so I also do a lot of workshop facilitation, and so I do a lot of curriculum development and designing, and so I feel like I write books in the same way that I make like a curriculum piece. Like we're going to go through like experience together. Every 5 minutes we're going to do something new, because I just, I get bored real quick, so we're going to do something else, But that's what I've loved about self-publishing and just being in this world is just, getting to create the content that I feel like we deserve. Like I think it's important for, especially like when I think about as queer folks, but I think especially just as Black and brown, trans and queer folks, to create content with the default being that Black transness is a default, and not that oftentimes we're asked to write from a perspective in which we're not actually the audience ever, right? When I see what's most popular.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And I think there's definitely been this default of, straight and white specifically within the big five corporate publishing industry and all of that. And you especially see it now where it's like, it almost feels like, and I guess this gets into performative allyship a little bit. You see these big publishing houses saying, we're seeking diversity in these type of things. And it's like, okay, I see this a lot because I'm an LGBT author. And so I see this a lot when I'm like, I've been writing, female romances, and I've been writing queer stories for years and publishing them on my own and starting my own business and running my own thing. And then you get this thing that's like, oh, we're seeking an own voices lesbian narrative. It's like, great. Indie authors have been doing that for decades. So, you're not special. Just now that you think it's like going to be marketable, now you want to do it,
But that's the thing, right? It's marketable, right? So it's like, I think for many people, and what I've also just recognized in these last few years, I think more than I knew before, is how much people take folks at their word and not at their actions, right? So like the big five could say, oh yeah, we want more Black and brown folks, we want more disabled folks, we want more queer folks, we want more this. It's like, are they doing it because they actually value our developments as authors or as writers in our craft? Or are they doing it because they want to make a lot of money and suck you dry of all the things that you have, right? And that's a very different space to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I felt this entire time. And I think that it's important, in my opinion, to uplift indie books, especially because that's, you know, historically, the publishers function as gatekeepers in a lot of senses, where it's like, you know, you can talk about like, oh, there's a lot more, at least from my perspective, writing like queer books, there's a lot more queer romance out here, which is like, that's great. But like indie authors have been pioneering that and putting them out on Kindle and you know, putting them out in bulk for years and years. So yeah, it's like, you know, uplift and celebrate the small creators and small business owners out there, friends. But everyone who's on my channel knows this because I'm all support small businesses every day. Books and Sip says, just wanted to say hi, listening while at work, so can't comment much, but I'm glad to hear about this book and topic. Great! I'm glad you're here. And Barbara says, yes, I was just saying this, indie authors can use fusion approach towards genre and category, merge, blend, crossover, just write your story, period. That's what it's all about. So I guess that's a good transition when we're talking about, you know, these companies and their performative allyship. So you found my channel when I did a video about Rachel Hollis. And so for some context, I know most people who are here probably know my channel, but on my channel, I focus on, you know, book reviews, writing stuff, but also like the business scammer world. Because, you know, as a small business owner, I see a lot of these entrepreneurial, you know, entrepreneur Instagram types, these entrepreneurial influencers who are out here like, buy my course, you can run your own small business too, just pay me $2,000, like all of that.
Have you ever fallen for those things? Because I've definitely fallen for them. I
did a video. I went to like an MLM style job interview by accident when I
did see that one, yeah.
Yeah. So I did a video, and that's what kind of got me into this world at first, where I was like, these things are predatory, the way that they're like going on Career Builder, pulling people's resumes, like interview for our company. But then when you go to them, it's like they're trying to get you to like cold sell to random people and then recruit people into your downline so that they can sell and you get their commission. And I'm like, this is bad. So I do a lot of videos exposing companies that do that. And I do a lot of videos exposing like these, you know, influencers that are trying to, you know, capitalize on people's desire to start something of their own that's creative. So Rachel Hollis has been a big target of mine because I first found her when I did a review of her book, Girl, Wash Your Face, because I was like, oh, she's a powerful woman in business. I want to read more books by women in business. So I read her book and I was like, this is full of body shaming. This is full of, you know, you can't be successful if you're overweight. This is full of horrible, like terrible messages. This is full of such a narrative of like, you are so in control of your own destiny, which like, I get the motivational aspect of it, but on the other hand, that's victim blaming, right? Because sometimes people end up in a situation outside of their control. And that's where that kind of led me into the whole like law of attraction world. And there's just so many of these types of things, right?
And that's actually, I found you through the scam stuff because like I used to be in an MLM. So I'll say that.
Oh, you did? I didn't know that. Which one?
I got falling down all the rabbit holes, you know, like I used to be a very, just like, oh yeah, like just positive thinking type person. You know, this is like over a decade ago, like when I was in my early 20s and I just, you know, thought, oh, I could just change the world with just my thoughts. If I just think this way, this is what's gonna happen. So I'm obsessed with watching that stuff, and I just really appreciate some of that content, you know, from you.
Well,
and just like,
I'm so glad it's been useful. Which MLM were you in?
ACN.
I don't even know that one.
So ACN, for people that don't know what ACN is, it's like a selling phone service. And so if you can imagine, I was maybe like 22, this is like 14 years ago. And so even then, people were using cell phones, but ASAN didn't have cell phones. ASAN had a home service. So you can imagine being a 22-year-old kid with no friends who have home service, trying to sell home service to people and being convinced this was your path into economic sustainability. Like, so I was gullible, y'all. So it's like, if you ever feel bad about being gullible, I took all the okie dokes I could ever okie doke. Okay.
Oh, I get, yeah. So that was kind of like the interview that I went to for one was like, it was like selling T-Mobile services door to door. Like they like had some kind of thing where like they got the T-Mobile packages and then you were supposed to sell them door to door and then you were supposed to recruit other people below you to do that and then get a cut of their commission. And it was part of like the whole smart circle, I guess, thing, which I'm trying to work on a whole investigative thing on that now as well. Oh, we got a few other people here. We've got Bo, Spence, and Eva. Glad y'all are here.
Hey, folks.
Yeah. So when I see people like Rachel Hollis and the Grant Cardones and Tony Robbinses of the world, I'm not really a fan of Rachel's, but I've done a lot of videos on her. And then the one you reached out to me about, I had done because people were DMing me on Instagram being like, did you see Rachel's new post that her fans are just dragging her for? And I was like, oh, interesting. So I looked and I was like, at first I was like, this is interesting because she seems to be taking a new direction where she's not deleting all the negative comments. So on the one hand, it's good that she's not deleting all the negative comments, but on the other hand, these comments are like pretty horrible. So I was like, I don't want people to think that like, well, sorry, my camera turned off. It's like, I don't want people to think that like, I disagree with her on a lot of what she did, but what she said here was true. So, I'll make this video saying that she's right. And then you pointed out that it's like, well, she shouldn't be the one necessarily getting the credit for this. And I think you were making a really good point there. So could you, I guess, elaborate on that point and kind of talk about that since we're here to talk about like performative allyship of influencers.
Yeah, and so the reality is like, so Rachel Hollis, and so I know most of what I've known about Rachel Hollis, I just want to say I've known from you, from watching your videos. I'm like, this is a new I've never heard of before. Like, let me check in this. But so, Rachel Hollis, like many white cis het people that have created these massive audiences of MLM stuff, of feel-good thinking, have been gaslighting Black and brown people and Indigenous people their entire lives, right? And so one time she actually sees the humanity of a Black woman and is supposed to get applauded for it. It's like she's surrounded herself with people that are racist to violently so and covertly and overtly so to Black, brown, Indigenous folks all the time. And so she made a post. That's the least that she can do for the trauma that she's also inflicted, because her line of thinking has been so toxic to so many. Not that she has piloted this type of thinking, right? She's one of many, right? Whether that whole grouping of people has created a whole movement of folks that refuse to see actual negative outcomes from what they do, right? Like, if it's not positive, I don't see it. If it's not this, if it's a critique, if someone's coming at you, it's like, no, white supremacy is real. White antagonism is real, and Black and brown Indigenous folks shouldn't have to deal with it, right? And so especially when we get to this very real place in the last few years where it's been more common to see the body cam footage, the neighborhood footage, the cell phone cams of people being murdered by police and all this stuff. This is stuff that we've been talking about for millennia. Since police were instated in the US, we've been talking about this, right? And so, I think there's always this rush that when a white person, especially when a white woman is being attacked for doing something that's seen as good, which is really neutral, because she's really just stating the facts, right? The facts are that Breonna Taylor didn't deserve to die and didn't deserve to be murdered by 3 police officers while she was sleeping in her bed. And so why not also censor the people that actually have been already having this conversation, and the people that actually have to deal with the emotional baggage, the economic baggage, the physical baggage, and the policing of being told that our experiences aren't real or important all the time.
Yeah, and I especially like what you were saying. I mean, she was just, stating facts. And I think this word facts, I was just thinking about this the other day. A lot of people think that if they say that something is a fact, that means that whatever conclusion they draw from it is right.
Right.
I was seeing this a lot in her comment section, where people who were, in favor of these police officers were being like, well, clearly you don't know the facts. And then they state some statistic or some number or something, and it's like, okay, but your conclusion that you draw from seeing something is not a fact. That is clouded by your judgment and your experience.
And just even like, just for clarity, it's like, do people know how many people are killed by officers every single year? Like, just as a clarity, like, it's over 1,000 people are killed by the police in the US. Less than 89 police officers were killed in 2019 on the job, right?
Yeah.
And only about half of those were actually by another person. The other half were by accidents, right? And so even when people pull out this false dichotomy, like, police chose a job, right, to protect citizens.
Right, that's their choice.
Turn that into murdering civilians, right? And being okay with that dichotomy.
Yeah. And also, yes, it's also sometimes people forget, even people who pull out a fact that's like, oh, well, the police, they killed whatever. It's like, the police are supposed to kill 0 people. The part of their job is not supposed to be killing anyone. People. Yes. Killing people is not in their job description. No one's profession should ever be killing other humans, because that should not be a legal or moral profession in any world.
Because we would say, if another country did that, we would say it was barbaric. We would say that it was inhuman. We would say that's proof that these people are savages over here, or they're this or they're that, right? But if it happens in the U.S. to folks of color, especially to Black folks and to Indigenous folks, well, who cares, right? We shouldn't have been. We really, like, people, what they're really trying to prove is that we actually don't deserve human thought, right, or human niceties, or just the right to live, right? That's what a lot of those arguments are trying to prove and dictate.
And it's also, I think there's, and this is, I think, what you were getting at with, like, how her message appealed to this type of person in the first place. It's people who have a very self-centered mindset, which comes from that toxic positivity idea that we were talking about, where it's like, if you do positive things, good things will happen to you. If you are a good person, your life will be good. And then that leads down this dangerous slope of, like, okay, if I'm a good person, then my life will be good. That means if this person's life is bad, they must have been a bad person, because if they were a good person, then their life would be good. And that's how we get to victim blaming and things like that, because it's like, okay, well, now people are looking for excuses that something bad. And I don't know if that stems from, like, this existential fear that, like, oh, that could never happen to me. I want to pretend that I'm safe from certain. No one's safe from circumstance. Bad things can happen. Yeah.
Bad things can happen, but not to everybody all the time, right? So there's certain things that are very unlikely to happen to certain people. So even when we talk about, like, a good life, right? Good in relation to who, right? So because in that world, right, good means that you are upper class. Good means that you own property. Good means that you get to be seen as a thought leader or as an expert, or, like, you get to be seen as someone who is smart, intelligent, has all these degrees, has all this stuff, right? But you have some clout, you have some social capital, right? Versus, like, good can mean, like, I have a partner that loves me. Good could be like, I have a family. Good could be like, I have a whole neighborhood of people that know my name and are looking out for me, right? So good, even in that space, is if your life is not for capitalism, it's not good, it's not worthy, and it's not certainly worth protecting.
And I think that, like, that's a good point, because it leads back to the whole, like, I guess, prosperity gospel and that idea, and things that people like Tony Robbins, I don't know if they necessarily pioneered it, but they definitely popularized it in certain places.
Yeah, they didn't pioneer it, but, like, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, it's been around, and it's been a part of how people view, because, and I guess that comes back to, like, a capitalist type of thinking, but it's where, the idea that, like, your life will be good if you are financially successful. Here's how you can hustle 24/7. And that's right. And that ties back into the multi-level marketing world, and this world of, like, selling people on this dream of being wealthy and powerful, when in reality, that's not the only definition of good. And in a lot of cases, it's not good, because, like, maybe you'll find it good if you're the person on top, but how many people's lives did you have to ruin to reach that level of complacency for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how many people, like how many other people had to live without food, without water, without clothing, without housing for you to get what you got, right? And how can that ever be good, right? That doesn't make sense, And so which is also, like when we talk about whiteness and white supremacy, like that type of individualism is also a very white concept, right? Like the idea that you can be living your life for yourself and only yourself it's totally to ignore like your family responsibilities, your obligations. I don't know about anybody else watching, but like I know I had to be a caretaker when I was in my 20s, right? Of other people in the family that didn't have it like that, right? The expectation is if I make money, it's not just my money, it's also my community's money. It's also my stuff. Like if I say I'm going to make this much money this year, that's because I know that there's people I love and care about that might not be able to make rent. And I know I'm going to make their rent. I know I'm going to do this, right? And so that's that individualism, that capitalism, that's all a very like Western white philosophy that isn't honest about what many of our lives look like and have to look like, right? We all can't have, because of capitalism, even by itself, even if we divorce our cultural sort of stuff, capitalism by definition means we all can't have that life of thinking only about ourselves.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. Okay, so there's some comments coming in. Just so y'all know in the chat, if you want to ask any questions or if you have questions that you want addressed, we have a question from Kawaii Lawsuit Filed, who says, how do I explain ACAB to someone who claims they know good cops? I tried telling them that they chose to be part of the system. They argued they chose to be part to do good. I love your vids. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're here. And I think that is, a great and difficult question. So I'll turn it over. Well, my camera just.
The camera's like, I'm going to see this.
My camera's like, yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
So again, like, how can it be good if it causes harm to other people, right? So again, if we're talking about the system, it's like, unless good cops are turning in their murderous brethren, right? Unless good cops are saying we actually don't need to police this neighborhood this much, unless good cops are saying the actual like cash bail needs to be done with, like what does that mean to be a good cop? Like, are you friendly? Are you nice to people?
Yeah.
You say hi to good little white kids in their neighborhoods? Like, what is good, right? Because I've seen good cops throw people on the street, right? Like when I was living in New York, I was going through neighborhoods in which I would see police officers with military assault rifles or like other types of military equipment. Are they good cops? Like, because they didn't shoot me that day? Like, what does good cop mean? And so I think that, again, people need to stop thinking that like one individual person can be good or bad. It's like, what else are you connected to? Who else are you connected to? If you are purposely buying into a system that kills the most targeted, the most marginalized, the most disenfranchised, I have to tell you, that doesn't feel very good. It doesn't sound very good. I've never heard a framework theologically or secularly that would lead me to think that was a good profession or a good group of people. And so I think we have to have higher standards of what good means. And so there are some people also that there's nothing that you can say, because we're also not often honest about the lack of empathy that exists. There are people that literally do not see Black, brown, and indigenous people as human, right? And I need white folks to understand that it's not just a debate about dialogue. It's not something that we can do through theory. There are people that would kill me and not think about it for a second and not feel guilty. When we have people like that kid who killed 2 protesters, right? And whose parents were applauded at the Republican National Convention. We have to acknowledge there are some people you need to stop having debates with about that and move with people that are willing to actually redistribute resources, that are actually willing to disrupt systems, that are actually willing to do that stuff, because that cyclical conversation will also trap you into, again, perpetuating systems of power. Because you're wasting time, you're wasting energy, and you're wasting resources that could be better spent on people actually being impacted by the violence.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it's interesting how it's what you've been saying this whole time. Like, when you look at the word good, what does good mean to you and what does it mean to other people? And the word good is relative, because like if you think you're a good person, are you someone else could be being hurt by you. And I think in a lot of cases, a lot of people say like, oh, I know a cop that's a good cop. Well, are they good in the sense that they followed their orders? Like, because a lot of people grow up thinking that being good means doing what people who are in authority over you have told you to do. You know, we're rewarded for that from the beginning. Like if you were in school and you don't talk when you're not supposed to talk, you're good. If you're in school and, you know, you do your homework and you're considered good. But it's like the whole idea of good being tied back to like you listen to someone else tell you what to do and followed what they told you. You know, if you're a cop and someone else murdered someone and you're not actively speaking out against them, are you really a good person? That's what it comes down to. Yeah. If you think your profession is you know, helpful and necessary, but you're not willing to speak out when someone else does something that shows it causing harm, then what are you doing? That kind of thing.
I think if you can rationalize people killing people on your time clock, I think you're not a good person.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Yeah. I've brought this up that, you know, in arguments with other people that one person's life lost is too many. Cheyenne says, my friend just posted Girl Wash Your Face and said this is one of the best books she's read and loves the message in every chapter so far. Oh, wow. I will say there were a few messages I liked in it. There were a few things, you know, but in every chapter, no, there was too much of this, you know, you are in control of everything, which is false. There was too much of this. There are no overweight animals in nature. If you're overweight, you're treating yourself like an animal, which was appalling because I will say I need to make a video on this at some point. I had a brief stint in the pro eating disorder community when I was unmedicated for my mental illness back in the day. And the type of rhetoric she puts out there is fodder for the pro eating disorder community based on what I've seen, you know, based on this whole thing with that. I've gained like 50 pounds since I've been out of that community and I'm a happier and better and healthier person. So she's wrong. I'll just be your anecdotal evidence on that.
Listen.
Yeah. Christina is here. Hello, Christina.
And can I just say, Kauai, thank you for that question, by the way.
Yeah, that was a great question. And I'm glad that helps. I want people to I love when people can come away from a video or a stream being like, now I have something I can say to someone who asks me this question.
Because what I'll say to y'all, because people often ask me like, well, how do you recharge? Or how do you knowing all these things in the world and doing all the work that you do, how do you recharge? Listen, I do not waste my time in conversations that will do me no good and no good for people I love and care about. So if I'm seeing that cyclical stuff, I get a lot of sleep because I work with people that I know are ready to move and are ready to do the things that need to happen, period.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah. I sleep a lot too. I think a lot of people this is tangential based on you saying you get a lot of sleep, but I think with the glorification of working, I work a lot of hours and I will be upfront about that, but I sleep a lot. People like love to glorify sleep deprivation. I only slept 2 hours because I work 150 hours a week. That's not healthy, dude.
That's not. You gotta. When I think about movement and revolution and stuff, it's you gotta be alive long enough for the end of the revolution. So that means, just drink your water.
It's a marathon and not a sprint. You know.
Listen,
Eva is looking at a chunky squirrel out the window. There are overweight animals in nature, friends.
Also, we're animals. I don't know. People get weird about that. We're animals.
I agree. We're animals. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Also, it's a pandemic. Eat what you want to eat.
Oh, definitely. I've gained so much weight in the pandemic, and it's
Don't forget Fat Bear Week.
Oh, my husband popped in to be like, Fat Bear Week. Now is everybody's voting on the fattest bears that are going into hibernation.
Oh, that's so cute.
Oh, 747. Okay, so there's this bear named 747 that people were loving. Anyway, that is just a separate tangential thing. Take some more comments.
Yeah.
Cross country friends. I have family members that worked in a switchboard room for the police calls. They preach cops are good, but then I've heard them say the most racist stuff behind closed doors.
So they're good for racists. Yeah. So cops are great for racists because cops love to protect white folks. They love to protect property, right? So that's really great for when we go back to the good life. Because even when y'all ever look at those neighborhood guides, I think by USA Today and some of the different places, and be like the top greatest neighborhoods to live in 2019 or 2018 or 2020. I don't know if people have seen those lists, But every time, I always check out those ones, and it's always the whitest, richest, whatever town with, with absolutely like, if it has 0.004% Black folks, it's probably going to make it onto one of the best neighborhoods lists, right? And so, yeah, cops love those neighborhoods. Cops love being around those neighborhoods and protecting those people all the time. And that, with that, back to that capitalist good life, like, it's exactly what they're there for.
I also would love to see, like, because a lot of people that I've talked to don't believe, like, they I guess just they can't visualize in their head people saying racist things behind closed doors or something.
They say it in front of your face. Like, what?
Yeah, but they just, for some reason, a lot of people I talk to are like, nah, I can't see that happening. I think someone, maybe you cross country friends, or maybe someone else, like, I want to see some kind of video exposing this. Like, here it is. I recorded this. Look at it. Look, it's right here in front of your face. You can't ignore it.
There's two things coming up for me, because even like, I think also many white folks have low bars for what racist comments are.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that I've ever been in a room with a group of white people and I haven't heard something racist, right? Now, would white people identify as racist? No, but I know what dog whistles sound like, right? What that kind of dog whistle looks like, right? And so we're going to have very different standards, because I know, all those different microaggressions and macroaggressions that tell me I'm not supposed to be there, right? One thing that I'm looking at, this comment from Kathleen Garcia Benson. I can't stand Rachel Hollis's body and health shaming words. Can we also talk about body shaming as also being a white supremacist value too, right? So in the ways in which we think about the Hottentot Sergeant Bartman, when we think about the ways in which Black folks and brown folks, indigenous folks, regardless of what our income looks like, are more likely to live within walking distance of things like garbage sites and toxic waste places, and places that give us less autonomy over what happens to our bodies, right? Like when we think about having asthma, or like when we think about having safe places to walk, right? If we have the capacity to walk, if thinking about if we live in a food desert, right? And so the audacity of people telling us that what happens to our bodies is our fault, when we oftentimes haven't had the right to what happens to our bodies and where we can make choices about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And I'm just still shocked that, like, people can say in the same breath, like, healthcare, privatized healthcare is just fine as it is, and then also you're in charge of what happens to your body. Like, how do those things work together? Doesn't make sense. But I think that's a really good point you made about, I think a lot of what people consider also, like, beauty standards tend to come, especially in the US and in Western countries, come from a white perspective, which I'm white myself, and I find that frustrating and offensive,
I was looking at I'm trying to go back up with the comments too. With Barbara Howard, the FBI already provided research showing law enforcement agencies have been infiltrated by white supremacist groups. It's a fact. Yeah, but also, can we talk about how they started that way? Because I think that's the language for me is even tricky when FBI is like, oh, we see that they're infiltrated. It's like, well, how did they start, right? Because they started, right? Because the kind of policing that we're looking at, especially, was an uptick after slaves were freed, right? And so the kinds of so when I think about the ways that we criminalize Black folks without having to say the word Black, right? We started seeing like loitering laws, right? So we criminalize people for being around and not having places to go. We criminalize people for being seen as suspicious. We criminalize people for not having money for an ID, right? Like we criminalize people for lots of different things, especially when I think about the intersection for myself as being both Black and trans, right? Like, there's different ways that we get kind of caught up in those white supremacist laws and morality laws and codes, right? And yeah, so I would like the FBI to talk a little bit more about the history of policing. I want them to be honest about that. I want them to be honest about the root of the FBI, so all of it, right? Because who is the government protecting? Like, I don't know what to protect Black and brown folks, and certainly not indigenous folks.
Yeah, let's see. We got a lot of comments. Thank you everyone for comments. Feel free to drop any questions or comments you have. Yeah, so is it Aden or Aden? I don't want to pronounce it wrong. Let me know if I pronounce your name wrong in the comments. But saying, then if some Black people want to move to those great neighborhoods, they advertise so much, people act like it's not that great anymore.
Right. I don't know if y'all saw this article, and this is something that, so I remember when I was younger and my parents were trying to sell the house that we owned, that we grew up in, we were instructed to not have any of our family photos out, right? Because
I've heard that, yeah.
And that would drive down the cost of housing, right? There was actually an article out very recently that showed this couple, I think it was an interracial couple, Black and white couple, and they found that when they left, they scrubbed the house of all the Black images. Suddenly, the person who was appraising the house, it was marked up 40% higher as a worth, right? So that is very real. And people, again, like people smiling in your face all day will do the most racist, effed up stuff. All the places. I remember when I was, and to Aden's comment, I remember being in this class when I was in, I think I was 19 years old in my in one of my sophomore classes or whatever, and we had this professor. And so what she would do is this Black professor, she would have us in these groups, and my group was 2 Black folks, 2 white folks, and we would go and we would go around the neighborhood and we would see how we got treated in different spaces. One of the spaces was this pizza spot that had a job opening apparently, right? And so myself, I went in with a resume and said like, hey, like I'm looking to apply for this job, XYZ, XYZ. And so they said, oh, we actually don't have any spots available. That one was just taken, right? Later, like a few hours later, we had the white person come in and, put in their little resume and everything. And they said, oh, like, yeah, we can put you in for an interview. Do you want to do one later today, right? And so it was just such a quick start thing. One of the people in my group, this white woman, she burst into tears talking about it. She was like, I can't believe that happened. But, this is at this time, I think it's like 2004, whatever it was, and she was just in tears. She's like, I can't believe this still happens. I was like, I'm surprised that you're surprised. I'm actually frustrated that you're surprised and that you have a right to cry about some stuff that did not impact you. I'm trying not to curse because I don't know how,
you can, yeah, say whatever you want.
I'm stopping myself from dropping little shits and fucks the whole time.
I swear on this channel all the time. It's fine. Say whatever words come into your head. This is an open talking space here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see.
How are police officers recruited in the UK? There's an academy, there's bias training. So let's talk about bias training. You actually have to believe that I'm a worthy person to believe for that training to work. So I do a lot of racial justice training, a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, if I'm talking to you, like I tell people, this is the example I'm going to give y'all, and y'all can think this example is messed up, and I don't actually care, okay? But the example I'm going to give y'all is, I have a little dog. I was telling Savvy, my little dog might make some noise in the background, whatever. And every day we go out for a walk. And I let her on the leash. She's terrible on the leash for me, like in terms of she doesn't care like when I'm saying where we're going to go. I let her lead me on the walk. She takes me for a walk, okay? We go around the neighborhood. At the end of the day, even though I let her lead, I decide when the walk is over. I decide when we're coming back home. I decide like I'm the one paying the bills. We don't negotiate. Like but I talk to her every now and again, right? That's how a lot of people talk to Black folks, like period. Police officers in the UK also talk to a lot of Black folks just like that too. I've been to the UK. I've been all over, right? I've seen my friends in the UK have to deal with police, all these different things, right? And so there's this belief that because someone can articulate stuff or talk about stuff, that means they're not participating in the same stuff they're about to do, right? And that's very wrong. There's a lot of capital in white supremacy, a lot of capital.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. I think there's at least on Twitter, but like Twitter is a hot mess. So I don't know about Twitter, but on Twitter a lot of time I see a lot of people trying to claim that like the UK isn't racist all the time. And I'm like, wait, what?
The two places I actually hear the most that people will always say like, oh, I've never heard of racism. We don't do that here. Yeah. California and Canada. Okay. Like those are the top 2 places. People are like, I just don't know what you're talking about because we didn't grow up like that. It's like, no. Watch where money changes hands. Like that'll tell you everything you need to know. Look at the prison system where you are. That will tell you every single thing you need to know. Look at the deportations where you are. That will tell you every single thing you need to know. People being in proximity to each other on a street corner does not mean that they're actually having the same life. Right? Or the same life chances. Okay. Yeah, and so I think that that's people assume because Americans like we we get blasted, and so we learned slavery from somewhere. I just like like slavery didn't start on the U.S. continent, right? On the in the U.S. in the country of the U.S., right? And so I think that what I would tell people in Europe is like people in Europe got to be way more honest with themselves about even when we think about what is it called? I'm missing. Oh, this word's going to bother me. But so there's a lot of countries that still pay the UK. When I think about Jamaica still having to pay the UK every single year for the right to be free. When I think about other English-speaking countries that have to pay Black countries, brown countries that have to pay the Queen of England and the whole country of the UK for the right to be free, right? And totally, countries that our president over here in the U.S. will call shithole countries, all the kind of stuff that keep France afloat, that keep Germany afloat, that keep Sweden afloat, right? And, we'll act like, oh, we're not racist. We just charge Black and brown folks out the butt, for us not directly owning them anymore, but we'll own them economically. Most definitely.
There's a few really great questions in here. So where did they go? Oh, April Carroll says, what do you think we could do about doctors that don't take Black patients as seriously as white patients?
That's most doctors have experience.
Yeah.
And real quick to Karen, we weren't saying that you were saying that the UK isn't racist. We're saying that's a common thought.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I didn't mean to imply that, Karen, if so. Yeah.
Yeah. And April over here, so what do we do about doctors? I need us to pour into Black and brown doctors. Mm-hmm. So I think that we have to stop doing this thing of we're going to teach white people to be better. Why aren't there more Black and brown doctors? What barriers are existing, right? Because a lot of the stuff, when we think about where vaccines come from, Black folks taught white slave masters how to do vaccines, right? On a real tip, right? And so the idea that that medicine from Black, brown, indigenous folks historically has not been valuable is wrong, right? And the ways in which we get priced out of going to things like medical school, the ways we don't get treated not just as patients of doctors, but as potential entrants into the medical system, right? And so that also needs to shift. And so, for me, like I said, I moved from New York to Seattle, which Seattle has a 6% Black population and is a city under 1 million people. New York is I think 25% Black, but even 25% Black in New York means that's 2 million people, right? So you always have an opportunity to meet people or I went to a clinic where I was run by Black folks. Here, it's it took me years to find I had a skin problem, to find a Black dermatologist in the city, took me years, thinking about, so I just found my first brown doctor, and someone who's a brown skin doctor that I can actually go to and talk to about stuff, who takes me seriously when I'm saying oh, this hurts. And I'm honest about that. There's, I think about 25% of doctors think in the US that Black folks don't feel as much pain as other people, right? That when we're seeing medical students being surveyed, right? And so these are the same people that are going out treating people. These are people that are going to go into broke neighborhoods, right? And be with Black and brown folks and giving us substandard care, right? And be surprised and blame us when we're dying earlier deaths, right? So I think it's about, we really need to censor Black and brown folks being a part of the medical system, or a part of medical care. I'm tired of having to convince my doctor that what I'm saying is real.
Yeah.
Or them not having enough examples of what my body looks like when it is experiencing something. They'll have doctors say oh, well, with darker skin, it does this. It's I've been looking at my skin my entire life. Who are you talking to? Darker in comparison to what? What? But don't have examples of what an illness or symptom might look like on a brown-skinned body.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's always been this thing where it's and you guys know, I've talked on my channel about how I respect people who've gone to medical training because we get too many people with their essential oil saying, just eat the essential oils, right? And try to scam you. But I think there's also at the same time is a lot of people see someone as a doctor and are therefore they are all knowing. They know everything. And, I have experienced as a woman going to the doctor and having to go to 5 or 6 different doctors all across the country to treat one problem because they're like, oh, this is probably just psychological. It's probably in your head. Like, nope, it's in my body.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, y'all. That's the thing. And I agree with what you said about, we need more doctors who actually have this experience. What else do we have here? Lizzie Stockwell, I know this isn't the same, but I went to Christmas at my girlfriend's aunt's house, and the aunt said we couldn't act as a couple because her daughter would throw a fit and ruin Christmas. Wow. That's terrible. I'm sorry that happened to you. Let's see. Thank you, Annie. I'm glad this conversation has been helpful for you. Cross Country Friend says the UK and Canada is just quiet about it, but quiet racism is just as bad as loud racism.
Because Canada, like 25% of the inmates in Canada are Indigenous folks. It's like, well, where did, like, if y'all ain't racist, like, why are you incarcerating all these brown people, right? UK, like, what we're thinking about, again, like, whether it's seen as Commonwealth or whatever, it's like that the fact that the UK is, you could see someone like the Jamaican Prime Minister asking, right, like saying like we no longer owe this debt to y'all, and it wasn't a debt to begin with, right? That Black countries are put into impoverished situations because of white greed, right?
Mm-hmm. And April says, I was asking because I was born with cerebral palsy and I'm not taken seriously at all. So sorry you have to deal with that. That's terrible.
So April, what I would say in this time, like especially if you are a Black person, that what I found really useful is some of the online databases. Like, so I've been able to see doctors at least, being able to talk to them and I ask for direct referrals. So I'll say to my doctors, like, do you know a Black doctor in this field that could see me about this? Because it's like, I'm not, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm not going to take it's not serious for an answer. Like I'm trying to live forever. And if I want to live forever, okay, I need my health stuff to be taken seriously. So I don't, even if I'm seeing it as a problem, I'll switch to a different system, a different network, whatever needs to happen. I think also if there's, for whatever reason, again, if you're a Black person and you cannot afford a certain type of doctor, we're at a time right now where abolitionists and activists have been giving some language around reparations, giving and all that kind of stuff for years now, right? And this is the first year in my life where I'm seeing people actually giving to Black folks that need support. And so even if you were like, there's this doctor that I can see that I can't afford X, Y, Z, even starting a GoFundMe or a fundraiser around that, and people will support. And honestly, if you need some help around that for Black folks watching, let me know. I've been supporting a lot of folks, especially this summer and the spring, helping to gear their fundraisers because we deserve care. We deserve to be okay. And we deserved it well before the pandemic, but we especially need it and that intentionality now. So let me know if I can be of help.
Wonderful. So Annie says, I get triggered by WW. I assume that's white women who paint themselves brown or cosplay as Black. Yeah. And then perform allyship with seemingly no consequences. What do you think it'll take for Black people to gatekeep Black culture?
I think even if we do because I think there's a lot of us that are like clear on like this stuff is ours. Like this language is ours. These words are ours. This aesthetic is ours. This music is ours, right? That we deserve the benefits of the things that we create. And white people will still try to steal it. So white people steal it because white people, like that's part of whiteness is white folks steal shit. That is what it is. I think that sometimes there are those of us, like even when I look at that, what's that Attorney General Cameron or whatever the fuck his name is, there are Black folks that believe that if we're just nice to white people, if we suck up enough, if we, smile in the direction enough, that we'll get some kind of goodies. So yeah, so I don't know. So the answer is I don't know because there will always be someone who believes that if I'm nice enough, if I'm smart enough, maybe they'll like me, maybe they'll treat me well, maybe this is a sign for something. For some reason, it's making me think about the whole Oscars thing too. I'm thinking about Halle Berry being the only Black woman to get an Oscar, and she was interviewed a little while ago and said, when I first got this, I thought this meant that I was going to get more people in the door. And I realized years later, I'm so humiliated because I realized I'm just a token and I was just a token for people. Yeah. So I don't know. I think we're all trying to survive white supremacy in our own way. And I know I'm doing my little part to make sure that I keep Black stuff for Black people. That's so thank you for that question.
Yeah. If anyone else has any other questions, we've been on for about 55 minutes, so we can go a little bit more if anyone else has any other questions. But I mean, I appreciate all the questions coming in. I really want to make sure this discussion is as beneficial for everyone who's here as possible. Let's see. I think we're caught up on questions. Awesome. Well, I guess so. We're gonna wrap up pretty soon, but I guess like my last thing I would want to ask you is, you're clearly doing a lot of important work, and you're doing a lot through your art and through your speaking and through your poetry, and I appreciate that. As a creative person, I think that using your art to spread a message and tell a story and try to make the world better in some way is a great thing to do. I guess what kind of things do you want to see? I guess like looking into a hopefully hopeful future.
Listen, I'm a Taurus. I don't know if we did our star signs yet, but I'm a Taurus. I'm not good at the positive future.
Sometimes I'm optimistic and idealistic to a fault where I'm like, I believe we could all be good one day. Like I know people are like, you are naive, and I'm like, I know. But looking into the future, I guess what kind of future would you like to see? What would you like to see happen in the next couple of years to make life better?
So honestly, because someone asked earlier, like, what can I do during pandemic besides giving? Or doing this
I forgot to click on that question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But so honestly, to be straight up, I think the giving of resources is the number one thing people can do. People, I think sometimes white folks want different things. And if you don't have money in your pocket, I guarantee you, like, especially for, so depending on, because quite a lawsuit filed, I don't know what your background is, but for white folks that are watching, people can actually give up physical resources, right? So, and that means like, if you have money in your pocket, you can donate to Black folks and not have to need like some sob story. You don't need to have like our whole background of trauma that was inflicted on us by white supremacy. There's a lot of shit we've had to experience that has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our individual experiences, but specifically because we live in this world that's antagonizing Black, brown, indigenous folks all the fucking time. So give without needing to receive some kind of accolades, without giving some sort of like, some kind of proof. Like the proof is we're here and we've survived all this shit despite the attempts on our lives, right? So I think that's one thing. If people don't have resources themselves, or they feel like they don't, I guarantee you as white folks, you have proximity to some shit that you don't even know about yet. So you can help people fundraise and do stuff like that, right? I think also it's divesting from having to center white institutions, right? So even when I think about even going back even just to queer things, I see lots of people when a Black trans woman is killed, people will give stuff to like the HRC. It's like the HRC has maybe hired 2 Black trans women in the history of its existence and actually went a lot of ways to make sure that we were not included in the law as Black trans people. So actually, why don't you give directly to Black trans women, right? And Black trans femmes? Why not like, so divesting from thinking that there's some institutions, especially I'll see people like, oh, this white institution, XYZ institution. I don't care if it's a school. I don't care if it's a corporation. I don't care if it's a nonprofit. They're like, oh, we need to do some training with these people. Well, after the 5th cycle of the same diversity, equity, and inclusion training, when do you give up on that white institution and believe in Black and brown nonprofits that have been struggling, organizations that have been struggling, businesses that have been struggling, individuals that have been struggling, right? Investing all your time and energy into making white institutions better is supporting white supremacy. White institutions that have been getting by, screwing over Black, brown, indigenous folks for our labor, our intellectual property, or just by excluding us entirely, they can fail and they deserve to. It's okay. Let them, okay? Pour into other groups, right? Yeah, and just don't need to feel like you're the person in charge. Like, so for white folks have a hard time not seeming smart in places, right? Like, there's some shit that I don't know. I am not a rocket scientist. I'm not about to go to NASA and tell them how to do their job, right? One thing I like to share with people is like, when you were a kid, you learned 1 + 1 = 2. You learned 2 + 2 = 4. At some point, you learned addition, subtraction, division, and you got to make a decision about whether or not math was for you. I decided as a teenager, math was not for me. I'm not going down that road. It's not good for me, right? People don't expect someone with a kindergarten level of math understanding to have the same conversation of math as they do an astrophysicist. But we expect white folks to come into a space and be taught from the ground zero to have the same conversation about race that Black, brown, and indigenous folks are having. You will never have that same conversation as long as you live, because we've been having that conversation since birth. And it slows us up in our own progress and our own ability to know what we need by having to cater to white people. Okay? So do the justice of allowing Black, brown, and indigenous folks some autonomy, some rights to center conversations around ourselves, to center organizations around ourselves, and making sure that those organizations, those individuals, because again, not just organizations, because I don't care just about organizations, but individual people, make sure that we don't fail, right? Pour stuff into us, pour the land into us that we need, pour the money into us that we need, pour the basic, I don't need a PhD to be credentialed. I know what I'm talking about, period, right? Period. I'm an expert on some stuff, right? So all that. And for Black, brown, indigenous folks, I think outside of that is we need to, also helping support and sustain Black, brown, indigenous folks' safety plans during this time. The election in the US is coming up, okay? Upticks in anti-Black violence has gone up, anti-indigenous violence has gone up, anti-Asian violence has gone up, and Pacific Islander violence has gone up. Anti-brown and immigrant violence has gone up, right? And so that means that we need to put in some serious safety plans. And yes, again, some of that takes lots of money. Some of that means like I need a go bag. I need a bag that has my tent in it. It's got my safety gear in it. It's got like some things I can protect myself in it. It's got some food in it. I think that people should be making sure that Black, brown, indigenous folks have everything they need to survive in case things go left in lots of different directions. I don't care what happens on the election night. I know that violence is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen everywhere, but I know it's going to happen. And because we're watching the system that's happening, be honest with yourself about how you're showing up for Black, brown, indigenous folks, not just on election day, before that, after that, right? Because we actually need some support. And I'm so serious about this. I'm not trying to scare nobody, right? But I know that I'm having serious conversations with my loved ones about safety in ways I know my white colleagues are not, right? Because I know I'm watching what's happening, right? So even things like that, pouring into the safety stuff, those are the biggest things for me, and the most important, I think, things for me.
I think that's fantastic advice. When you talked about election night, it's just, I cannot believe how many people I hear, and maybe this is just because I need to get off of Twitter more often, but can't believe how many people I hear who think that like once Joe Biden is elected, everything will get better. And it's like, not everything will, he's not, it's like, we want Trump gone. Yes. But like or people who tweet like, if we had Hillary in office, none of these problems would have happened. And it's like, these problems go back way farther than that. And there's so much more work to be done rather than just voting once and then saying, I'm done.
Because the truth is, like, anyone who's in charge of imperialism is in charge of imperialism, right? Yes. Obama didn't close down ICE. Hillary would not have closed down ICE. Biden is not going to close down ICE, right? When we think about over-policing, all these different things, these are things that we've been solving as communities for a while, or trying to, and so none of that stuff is going to end after election night. And there's also a huge group of people that are inflamed right now that weren't inflamed at the same level, and it's simply a response to some basic shit. Like just even the proximity of having someone who is like a biracial blackface for 8 years, even though he was in charge of still bombing other Black, brown folks all over the world, was enough to incense a lot of white supremacist groups to get a whole new kind of footing. And white supremacy is a huge fabric of American society. We have to be honest about that. And we're at a critical time in which a lot more violence is happening.
It's been hard looking back on the Anita Hill hearings during Joe's. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
That's I try to encourage, and this is, from my perspective being a woman, I try to encourage women, like, if Biden gets elected, it's not time to give up. He's not been good to women either. So let's keep up the fight.
And he is a cocky little thing too. Like I need you to read some shit before you because he's so Biden's also assumed that he has everybody. Basically, Biden's answer to the whole thing is, "I'm not Trump."
Right.
That's
and it's like,
not Trump.
Yeah, you're not, but like, yeah. Anyway, Barbara says, I'm not convinced that you can train people not to be biased. I think it must be screened out during the hiring process, like a propensity to steal. It's an interesting point.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Because even stealing is under circumstance, right? So there are some people who steal. Like I remember, and I know we're kind of a little bit over, so I apologize if I'm talking too long. But
no, you can talk as long as you want. Keep going. I just don't want to take up your whole day. But if you want to keep going, I'm down to keep going for a little while. Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
But so, Barbara, what I'm thinking about is, so I used to do like background acting in New York, right? So New York, if you're an actor, you're a performer, you did some background acting, you've been on Law & Order at least 10 times. Like that's just what your job was, right? And so I remember one day I was on set and we were shooting a party scene of some kind, right? And so all the folks had all these really fabulous outfits, and there were these two white girls that were behind me while I was I was at the food stand, getting some food. And so behind me, one of the girls was like, "Oh, I love your dress. Oh my God, where did you get it from?" And girl was like, "Oh, I stole this from Charlotte Russe," right? And she said it so confidently, And they the other girl, she started looking around, and I'm just like, I'm not paying attention to y'all. So I just pretend like I'm not even here. I'm getting food. I don't care. I do not care. And so I'm saying that because she didn't have to steal from Charlotte Russe. She chose to steal from Charlotte Russe. This other girl and her started going on a whole conversation about how when they used to shoplift things, and they just met. Like these girls had just met, just started talking about how they used to shoplift things. Anytime I go into a store, I'm like holding things up like this. I'm like here, blah, blah. Like I've walked out of stores because someone has accused me of stealing. And I'm just like, I don't even where am I hiding things? Like, so it's like, so there's people that steal for things like that. And I have friends who have been chronically harassed by the police, who have chronically been in a situation where they didn't have money for food or medicine and have had to steal to save their own lives, right? And so even that is like that morality around that depends. Like, I don't know what human being who is over the age of 25 and has not committed a crime. I do know that only some of us are ever going to be held responsible for that. Right? Some of us are going to be seen as we have the capacity, and there's going to be this nuance around it. And then some of us, we have the capacity to make good decisions, bad decisions, all kind of stuff. And some of us are going to be seen as only people who break the law, period. Right? And so when we talk about a system, and especially policing, which again is the police exists, like it really depends. I don't know what neighborhoods everybody lives in. But being in Seattle in a white city, this is the least police I've ever been in my life as an adult person. Like I'm going around a very white city. And again, versus being in New York, rifles, right? Like if I was going to the train, I would pass by at least 6, 7, 8 officers. And the train station was like maybe 8 blocks from my apartment, right? And so the idea that, especially when you're talking about stop and frisk and all this other stuff, it's like people are getting caught for like weed stuff or other things. Well, we know that white folks are not smoking less weed. Like when the weed industry got big, right? White people, 92% white industry, right? White people didn't just suddenly get good at weed when it became legal. They just were able to profit from it because they were never criminalized for it, right? And so biases, like how would you even measure in a white supremacist society someone not having a bias against Black and brown indigenous folks? That's very few people. Black cops are just as likely to shoot a Black person as a white cop is. Because the system itself of policing is fucked up. It's not that it's these individual people coming in. It's like we live in a white supremacist society. We create an institution specifically to police the poor, to police Black and brown folks, to create more money for the state and to protect state property, right? And to protect upper class property, right? And so the whole system of policing needs to be dismantled.
Yeah, I like what you said, especially about there's really, I don't think I could name a single person who's never done something illegal in their life. And that's why when that's when I saw that, like when I made that video where you first emailed me from, and there were people being like, oh, well, this person was connected with this person who did a crime. And it's like, you're going to tell me you've never done a crime? Or like, if you're like, I don't know, a 50-year-old white lady that your son is not off smoking weed with his friends, like you're gonna tell me that? Like,
I was dating two things. So cross country friends, colonialism on America. What that brings up, the word I was trying to think of earlier was colonial debt. So Jamaica paying the UK, Haiti paying France, colonial debt. So thank you for that. Yeah, and so with this piece around little Johnny or whoever smoking weed, I was dating a professor for some time, and so I remember when I was dating her that there was this situation where we were on campus, she had some on-campus housing, and there was some students that were found with weed on campus, right? And the RA or whoever, the administrative staff person, said, we don't really want to get the police involved because, these people have bright futures, right? Mm-hmm. Versus there was a rehab clinic down the street, right? They always call the police on the rehab clinic, on the people purposely trying not to do drugs, right? Mm-hmm. Because those people didn't have a future, but the little white kids on campus did. Right. And so just even that and how that's treated. Right.
Definitely. Let's see. So Books and Sips says, thank you to you for taking the time today to do this. And I thank you as well. It's been really nice to meet you. Annie wants to know if you have a YouTube channel.
I do. I'm not really good at it. So you can find me on the YouTube. You should find me on the Instagram. If you like the Instagram, I do a lot more on the Instagram than YouTube. I'm like, I feel like it. I'll put something up. I literally don't pour any energy or effort into it. I repurpose material from my other stuff. So you can check it out.
Yeah, but so I've linked his Instagram in the description below. I think you guys should all follow. You have an excellent Instagram. So I definitely think everyone should follow. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to know if I can meet your dog.
Oh, no, she's sleeping.
Oh, she's sleeping. Oh, never mind that, because your dog just sounds cute from the way you described her.
She's a little miniature pincher. She's I try to put a little heater on for her and like some white noise machine so she'll like just go to sleep.
Oh, what a cutie. Yeah. Thank you for your also for having a senior dog who's 16 years old. That's one reason I'm doing a book about senior dogs. I hear too many people, they adopt a puppy or they buy a puppy, even worse, and then 10, 12, 15 years go by and they just are like, I can't handle this dog anymore. I'm going to let it go. And that's awful.
Yeah, no, my dog, she's like, we've been in it, she's the oldest dog in my family. So I think I was the only one who's like had a dog this long. And I'm like, I'm very committed to.
Yeah.
She's going to be 20. She's going to be 20. That's my commitment.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this stream with me today. I'm really glad you reached out. It was great to get to meet you, especially because I love your work on Instagram so much. And I really enjoyed reading your book. Everyone, please don't forget to look in the description below. We've got, right here. This book is linked in the description below. It has some really, really powerful poetry and some really excellent prose pieces as well, and it's just an excellent genre mashup. Use it to vouch for the importance of indie books out there, you guys. It's really good. So definitely check that out. Definitely follow on Instagram. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this collaboration today, and I'm excited to hopefully talk to you again in the future.
I'd love to talk more in the future too. It was great to get to meet you. And thank you to everyone who watched this stream and who left some comments or questions. I appreciate you guys interacting and engaging. I appreciate you coming here on a Thursday morning. Tomorrow on Friday morning, I'll have another video premiere for you guys and I'll see you in the chat there. But until then, don't forget to support small businesses, friends. Bye.
See y'all later.